Hello everyone, my name is Sean and welcome to my channel where I talk about languages and other random stuff related to that. Recently I put out a vote asking people which of these 4 languages I should be learning over the course of 2 weeks, and the winner ended up being Farsi, also known as Persian. I'll probably be using the 2 words interchangeably throughout the video, just so you know. Shame about the others a bit, they were all very worthy runner-ups, and hey, maybe I'll make videos about them in the future as well. Now, even though Farsi is definitely not the easiest language ever, also I've never studied an indo-iranian language before, but at the end of the day, Farsi is still indo-european, so the grammar was not the worst, and there were certainly some vocabulary that was somewhat familiar. Though I gotta say, the writing was definitely a challenge. I've studied Arabic before, and I can sort of read it, so I thought it wouldn't be much of a jump, because same alphabet. Well, that was a pretty dumb assumption to make. The pronunciation is quite different, there are new letters to worry about, and there are old letters that make different sounds. Anyway, the Persian language and Persia itself have played a very significant role in the development of not just Central Asia and the Middle East, but also the world. And keep in mind that the histories of Persia and of Iran and of the people who make them up and their culture and traditions are so very long and rich and complex, and people have devoted their entire lives to studying it all, so it's impossible to fit it all in one video. Farsi is native to Iran and the surrounding regions, where it's spoken as a native language by anywhere between 60 to 80 million people, and if we add second language speakers to this worldwide, then that number rises to over 100 million. The Persian language has hundreds of small regional dialects all throughout the region that it's spoken, but there are actually 2 other big notable varieties, and those are Dari, spoken in Afghanistan, and Tajik, spoken in Tajikistan. As far as I understand, the 3 are, for the most part, mutually intelligible between each other, but given the fact that the spoken area is so absolutely massive, you can certainly expect plenty of small regional differences in terms of pronunciation and vocabulary. Farsi and Dari are written using a modified version of the Arabic script, while Tajik is written using the Cyrillic script, a remnant of its Soviet past. Written from right to left, the Arabic script is, for the most part, in Abjad, which is a writing system that, for the most part, has just consonants, and the vowels are, for the most part, not written, but inferred from context. This can be quite confusing for somebody who's never encountered anything like this before. Like, for example, in Farsi, the words for worm, kerm, generosity, karam, cream, kerem, and krom, are all written the exact same way, krm, and the only way to tell really is by context. Now, there are a few key differences between the Persian and Arabic alphabets. Firstly, there are extra letters that don't exist in Arabic, and those are p, ch, j, and g. Secondly, a bunch of the original Arabic letters are pronounced differently in Farsi, and the result is basically 4 letters for the same sound z, 3 letters for s, 2 letters for t, and 2 letters for h, which doesn't sound very efficient to me, and there's 1.5 million historical reasons for this, and I'm not gonna tell them how to live their life, but I can certainly be like, why? Despite the Arabic script, Farsi, along with the other Indo-Iranian languages, are a part of the Indo-European language family, and despite a lot of people thinking the contrary it seems, it means that no, Farsi is not related to Arabic at all, which is a part of the Semitic branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family. Like, linguistically, Farsi is closer related to Icelandic than it is to Arabic, really. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean that Persian and Arabic are complete strangers to each other. I mentioned last video that some sources say that between 25 to 40% of all Persian vocabulary is of Arabic origin, though now I've come to find that some other sources say that nowadays that number could be as low as 15%, and that's also because of all the efforts over the last 100+ years to reduce the amount of Arabic loanwords and preserve Persian words. Arabic is far from the only language to influence Persian over the years, though. We've got loanwords from the Turkic family, not necessarily Turkish, like komak and doholu, loanwords from French, like douche, merci, and keravat, and even from Russian, like samovar, which is this massive, usually metal, water container thingy, mostly used to make tea, very popular in Persian culture. Farsi is an absorbing and unifying language, taking inspiration from all around and giving it its own little Persian twist. An important feature to note about Farsi is that it's very versatile, in the sense that it makes extensive use of affixation and compounding to make up new words from existing roots, and in fact, using these features, it is estimated that Farsi can derive over 226 million new words. So for example, danestan is a verb meaning to know, and if we take just the dan part, which is the verb stem, then we can have a lot of fun with it. Danish means knowledge, danishgah means university, danishgahi is an adjective meaning pertaining to university or scholarly, and ham danishgahi means university mate or like a course mate at uni. And so on and so forth, we can keep adding and removing various affixes and compounding additional words to create a variety of different meanings. Speaking of grammar, if you're learning Farsi, you better get used to a thing called ezafe, which is used to connect words to each other, and it's found everywhere. It's basically a short unstressed vowel, e or e, that you'll find at the end of many words, and the closest approximate English equivalent would be kind of like the word of, but not really. For one, it's used to indicate possession. So for example, baradar means brother, but if we want to say my brother, we have to add the ezafe, baradar e man. Also when linking a noun to an adjective, so to say big brother, we'd say baradar e bozorg. There are a whole bunch of other uses for ezafe, but the annoying thing about it is that it's a vowel. And as mentioned earlier, those aren't really indicated in writing, so you just kind of have to know when to add it and read it from context, which for a beginner might be a tad confusing. Other than all that, generally, Farsi is a pretty regular Indo-European language. It's got about 6 vowels, 23-ish consonants, and its basic word order is subject, object, verb. It's only got 2 cases, nominative and accusative, about 10 verb tenses, which is fewer than English, and no gender, which is a whole massive thing that you don't have to worry about when learning. Now, before we get into me demonstrating what I've learned and butchering the pronunciation and probably everything else, let's look at a bit of the history of how some of these features developed and how the Persian language got to where it is today. The Persian language is said to have originated in the southwest of Iran, around the area of the modern-day province of Fars. Hence the name. From around 600 to 300 BC, it was Old Persian. Written using the Old Persian cuneiform, it was the language of the Achaemenid Empire, ruled at various times by such rulers that you may have heard of as Cyrus the Great and Darius the Great. The empire ultimately fell to another great, known as Alexander, and from then on the period of Middle Persian begins. It's during this transition that Persian began to be grammatically simplified, adjectives and nouns lost their inflections, new tenses began to be formed, prepositions became the hot new thing, and it lost its gender system. Middle Persian reigned supreme from about 300 BC to around 800 CE. It was written using a script derived from Aramaic, known as Pahlavi, and Middle Persian was most notably the language of the Sassanid Empire. The rise of Islam and the Muslim conquest of Persia and the rest of the Middle East was the beginning of the end of Middle Persian, and it began to evolve into New Persian. This meant loads of changes in pronunciation, some changes in the verb system, a ton of new loanwords, and the introduction of the Arabic script. While since New Persian became a thing and until today, there have been plenty of changes and plenty of differences that were developed over the past 1,000 years, for the most part, speakers of modern Persian can understand stuff written all those centuries ago, which is so cool. Among the thousands of notable literary works and books and poems and national epics written in Persian over the years, the most famous one has to be the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings. Written somewhere between the year 977 and 1010 by a poet known as Ferdowsi, and with about 50,000 couplets, the Shahnameh is one of the longest poems ever written in the world. It's regarded as a literary masterpiece and considered to be the foundation of the ethno-national cultural identity of Persia and Iran. And even though it was written so long ago, I found native Persian speakers online claiming to be able to understand over 90% of what's written, which is crazy. Persian continued to be the language of culture, government, religion, art, poetry, and of everything else in a million different kingdoms and empires and dynasties throughout the ages, and we could talk about it until the end of time. Unfortunately, we don't have time for that, so let's fast forward to the year 1789, when the Qajar dynasty begins to rule Iran. Tehran becomes the capital, and the Persian dialect of Tehran rises to prominence. Over the course of the Qajar dynasty is when all of the foreign loanwords from English, French, and Russian began entering the language. Sometime around the end of the 19th century was when the first official attentions were being paid to the preservation of the Persian language, and in 1903 the first Persian Association was founded, aimed at standardizing the orthography and protecting the language from any more foreign words. The rule of the Qajar dynasty in Iran came to an end in 1925, when the Pahlavi dynasty came to power instead. The first academy for the Persian language was founded in 1935 under the name Academy of Iran, and in the 1930s and 1940s, the academy led massive campaigns to replace the many foreign loanwords that have entered Farsi over the years. The result is the basis of what is now known today as contemporary Standard Persian. Then, in 1979, the Islamic Revolution happens, and Persia, or Iran, is no longer a monarchy. And here we pretty much are today. And now it's time for Farsi. Salam, sob bikhair, اسم من شون است. از دیدنت خوشبختم. چطوری؟ خدا حافظ. من یک برادر بزرگ و یک خواهر کوچک دارم. زبان فارسی خیلی آسان نه است، اما هم خیلی دشوار نه است. شبیه به زبان ها اروپایی است. نوشتن دشوار است اما الفبای زیبا است. من دوستان ایرانی ندارم اما یک روز میخواهم به ایران سفر کنم. من هم میخواهم به افغانستان و تاجیکستان سفر کنم. من میخواهم به همه کشورهای جهان سفر کنم. انجام آن خیلی دشوار است اما من سعی خواهم کرد. من نمیخواهم در سیاست politics صحبت کنم. من فکر کنم ایران کشور خیلی زیبا است با چیزهای زیاده برای دیدن. تهران، اصفهان، شیراز، تبریز و کوه و طبیعت. من شنیدم که مردم خیلی مهربان هستند و کزا خیلی خوب است. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. امروز براناید من خورشید میخواهر. خدا بدهد برکت. Again, I apologize to anyone who found my pronunciation and speaking in general atrocious, and I'm sure I messed up a lot of things in there. Farsi is definitely worth reading about and learning a bit, as it gives you a fascinating glimpse into the colorful culture and traditions of the Persian people. I truly hope that one day I'll be able to visit Iran, explore the country, and interact with the people. In any case, that's it for today. I hope it was interesting and that you learned something new, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.